So in graphing, you have these things called domain and range. Domain, what does this mean? Domain is all possible x values on a graph. So if you have a graph that looks like something like that, what are all the x values that are involved with that, so the red line there? If you have all the x values, you also got to talk about y values. So that's range. Range is all possible y values in your function that is graphed there. So some graphs might have a certain amount of x's that they use, or maybe it has a limitation on how many y values it has. Let's do an example. Here's a graph. It's actually a parabola. Notice the red line. The red line is our function. That's what we're talking about for the domain and range. We're trying to find out how far does the x values go and how far does the y value goes with this red line. So you can see at the top right of this red line up there, it's a dot. Dot meaning that's where it starts, that's where it ends. It doesn't go further than that. But on the top left of it, it goes on forever. Let's do the domain first. Domain is your x values and range is your y values. So let's start with domain. Look at the x-axis on this graph. How far does it go? What's the greatest x value there is? Well, it looks like it starts at the dot. That's the positive value at 3. So the highest it can go is 3. Now, what's the lowest that x can go? Well, it goes on forever. It can continue to go negative infinite. So that means our domain, all the x values are either 3 or they're less than 3. Let's find the range. Range is up and down, y values. So what's the lowest point our y can get? It looks like it touches -1. -1 is the lowest it can go. Now, what's the highest it can go? Well, again, it looks like it goes on forever. All our y values have to be either equal to -1 or they go all the way up infinite. So they're all greater than -1. Let's talk example 2. Take a look at this graph. Looks a little bit different. We have to find the domain and range. Let's look at our x's. What is the lowest x it can go? It touches -2 with that dot. Closed dot means that it ends there and starts there, and it ends at +2 with the closed dot. So that means our x values get as low as -2 and it gets as high as +2. So x has to be within there. X is either less than or equal to +2, or it's greater than or equal to -2. It's never lower than -2 and it's never higher than +2. So this makes sense. Now let's look at our range. Y value. So we're looking at the vertical axis here. It looks like it doesn't get below 0. All the red line is above 0. And the highest point it gets to looks like it's 2. Y is never greater than 2. And it's never lower than 0. But it is equal to 0 sometimes. So we write this. Example 3. Now we have a graph and a function. And they tell us that the domain equals -2. Find the range. What does that mean? 2 ways you could solve this. Number 1, domain. Remember, domain means x. So they essentially said, what if x equals -2? What would be your range at that particular point on the graph? Solution number 2 is, on the graph, find where x is -2. What is the corresponding y? Essentially, they're trying to find a coordinate. When x is -2, what's your y value? Let's do solution number 1, which is use the function. Okay, here's our function. They say domain is -2, which is x. So f of x would be actually f of -2. Function when x is -2, right? And then substitute -2 in there. Now let's solve it. The function when the domain is -2 will equal 13. That means the y value for the range will be 13. AKA, we just found the coordinate when the x is at -2. We found out that y is 13. Let's do solution number 2. Take a look at this graph here. To find what the range is when domain is -2, look at your x-axis. Look for -2 there. Okay, now go up and find what the y value is when x is -2. We go up, up. It's 13. So the line appears to intersect the y-axis at 13. So the answer again, the function of when the domain is -2, y, or the range, would be 13. Question B, now it's the opposite. Now they give us the range, but they don't know what the domain is. 2 ways to solve this. Number 1 is to substitute 4 for your y and solve the equation, find out solving x. Or option 2 is you look at your graph and you find out when y is 4, okay, on your graph, on the red line, what is your x value? Arguably that is easier, but I'm going to show you how to do it on the equation so you're ready for your test. So remember, f of x is the same thing as y. Okay, they're the same thing. Y is equal to -3 plus 7. Okay, I just rewrote the equation using y. Why did I do that? Well, because they gave us our y value. They didn't give us an x value. They gave us a y value, range, so 4. And then it's back to grade 7 math. Isolate x. I'm going to rewrite it over here.
So the answer is 1. Let's make sure, let's check on the graph. So when y is equal to 4, go down. Yeah, your x value is at 1. So when the range is at 4, the y value is 4, x value is 1. Congratulations, you found the coordinates.